Good evening, everybody. It's 7 o'clock. It's on the 24th of November, and tonight is an extraordinary Cabinet meeting, and we're going to be discussing the local government reorganisation. So it's a particularly important meeting for Cabinet this evening. I'd just like to remind you that we are being live streamed. You know that. Welcome to those of you who are online. Welcome to those of you who are in the gallery tonight. But before we proceed, I'm in fact going to invite our monitoring officer to just remind us about process tonight, if that's okay.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to remind you that all councillors have previously received guidance on Section 25 of the Localism Act and the principle of open-mindedness. This evening, you are here in your capacity as councillors for Huntingdonshire District Council. And it is essential that you approach the debate this evening with an open mind, considering the evidence and professional advice presented to you tonight, irrespective of any prior meetings or decisions on this matter in which you have been involved. Now, following last week's extraordinary council meeting, I would ask Cabinet to reflect on whether they are able to participate in this evening's decision-making with an open mind and to make any necessary declarations accordingly. If any member has previously participated in discussions or voted elsewhere, and I believe you will have done, please could you declare that for transparency and confirm that you remain open to considering the matter afresh here this evening. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Anita. So I'm going to go around the room. Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. I voted on this matter at Cambridgeshire County Council and Huntingdon Town Council previously, but I am still open-minded.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr.
I too have voted on this at County Council and Town Council and remain open-minded.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you. I'm a member of Huntingdon Town Council, but I wasn't at the time that they discussed this at their meetings, so I'm coming open-minded, fresh.
Thank you. Councillor Mickleborough.
I am not a member of any other parish or town councils, and I abstained purposefully last week at the full council meeting to bring an open mind to this evening's meeting.
Thank you very much. Councillor Howell.
I'm only a member of Wood Walton Parish Council, however they've not had a vote on this, and I also abstained last week.
Thank you. Councillor Davenport-Ray.
I have not voted on this subject at any other council, and I abstained when the full council met last week.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
I'm not a member of any other council. I did vote on this topic when we met full council. I'm always open-minded and always open to being convinced by my colleagues.
Thank you. Monitoring Officer.
Thank you, Chair. May I invite Councillor Howell and Councillor Davenport-Ray to confirm for completeness if they're approaching this evening with an open mind. Thank you.
Yes, I am approaching this evening with an open mind.
Yes.
And then Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. What I get for sitting in the same seat, I suppose. I get the same microphone that doesn't work. Thank you, Chair. Just for completeness, I don't sit on any town or parish councils. I do sit on combined authority committees, but I haven't been involved in voting on this elsewhere at full council last week. Like some colleagues around the table, I deliberately abstained, and regardless, I come to tonight's discussion afresh with an open mind.
Thank you, Councillor Wakeford. And for completeness then, I will also declare that I'm a member of God Manchester Town Council. I was present when they discussed it, but I did not take part in the voting, and I abstained when it came to full council so that I could retain an open mind then and for this evening. Thank you. In which case then, can I just take us back one item, because what we didn't do was apologies and members' interest. So are there any apologies?
Thank you, Chair. We have no apologies this evening.
Thank you. And members' interests, apart from anything you have just declared, is there anything else that you would like to declare this evening? No, I suspect we've done everything that we would need to do. Okay, thank you very much. In which case, then I'm going to move us through to the substantive item this evening. So this is the local government reorganisation in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. When we met at full council last week, I would like to say I was very, very impressed by the quality of the debate. the openness with which people treated that discussion, the way that people were able to talk factually and knowledgeably because they had read the business cases and engaged with those. I'm going to say the same sort of opening sort of statement that I made then, but I'm not going to read it verbatim. But you'll remember that we have a number of options in front of us, options A through to E. We already know how some of those options have been selected by councils. So just for completeness, we know that option A was chosen by Cambridgeshire County Council. They finished their process, so that's their final decision. We know that the Fenland District Council and Peterborough City Council both opted for option D. We know that East Cambridgeshire District Council were moving towards option B. I do not believe they've completed their process, so we're assuming that that may well be ratified. I can tell you that while we've been in meeting, just literally before we started, we believe that South Cambridgeshire might also have supported B, but they haven't completed their evening in terms of ratifying that decision. So that still has to go to their cabinet. But I think that probably just is useful for context. So before you tonight, you have a two unitary option and a 3 unitary option amongst the different variants of business cases that have been developed so far. So just as a reminder, the 2 unitary options are A, B and C as options, and the 3 unitary models are D and E. I think it would be fair to say that all of the options have strengths and they all have weaknesses. They all have advantages and they all have disadvantages. So tonight there will be an opportunity for you to participate in a debate and to express your views, and then we will move towards a vote at the end when we have all had an opportunity to express our views. As we saw in full council, people were very minded that our other councillors will be watching tonight, no doubt. Our neighbouring authority councillors, I suspect, will be watching, and some are even with us here this evening. And I suspect that the staff of those authorities are really likely to be watching because this is about their employment future. So I would just remind you, please, to be really thoughtful of that when you make your remarks, because it really matters that whatever option is chosen by us at the conclusion of this evening, these options that we all select as the 7 councils go to the Secretary of State, who ultimately will make the decision. So it is really important that we have the full confidence for our new staff that whatever configuration we have, it will be deliverable, and the same applies to our residents. So without further ado, I'm going to open up the discussion so that you have an opportunity to have your say, particularly as most of you did abstain at full council. And just for the record, because I know there was speculation on social media that somehow meant you didn't have a view, I know all of you incredibly well, and I know that you all probably have views that you will no doubt share with us this evening, but obviously an open mind until we get to a point where we look to make a decision this evening. I don't expect you to be shy. There is no particular order. You may speak as you wish. And I'm going to say pretty much like I said at full council, nobody's been whipped. This is entirely your decision this evening. It's too important, and it really matters that you have weighed all of the options and you consider each other's views as we go through this. In the debate, I would also urge that we consider the views of Overview and Scrutiny and the questions that they raised, and equally the comments that were expressed at full council. So who would like to start us off this evening? Councillor Ferguson, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Or thank you, Councillor Turpin. No, thank you, Chair. I want to start off by acknowledging what a complex task this is. When this whole process started off, Councillor Conboy, I remember you reporting back from the early meetings, and I think there was some optimism in those days that we might be able to come to a single solution across all of the councils, which seems rather naive now, doesn't it, with all the experience, because different areas have different requirements and different biases, and sometimes different political biases as well. So this has been a really complex task, and I think all the way through, if I'd tried to predict how it would turn out, even up to tonight, I think I probably would have got the wrong answer quite often. Certainly early on in the process, I remain convinced that my largely conservative colleagues from the north would vote for a politically beneficial solution, which would see those parts of the district paired with Fenland and Peterborough. And I just want to say to start off how immensely proud I was of the whole council at full council overnight, but particularly those Conservative colleagues who spoke with a single voice, I think, in their opposition, particularly for option D, but for their wish for Huntingdonshire to remain as its own entity and not be part of Felling and Peterborough. So I think that was an incredible thing. I think there were some brilliant speeches, and I was very swayed by their opinions. I'd also like to thank you, Councillor Conboy, because at the beginning of this, you promised this council that you'd listen to everybody's voices, and we know that across other councils that hasn't always been the case. I think when you said that early on in the process, there was some scepticism, especially from some of the opposition members, but you did. I think we have held ourselves to that promise, and I think both the ONS meeting and the full council meeting were excellent opportunities for us to listen to the voice of our colleagues and in fact all the residents they represent as well. And so we didn't come at full council to a single solution. The vote was split between option E and option C, but we did come to the conclusion that we didn't at the moment choose to be paired with Felling and Peterborough and preferred the other options, which I think is an important message. There was an event here for International Men's Health Day when I talked to Councillor Martin the day before the vote, and he asked me which way I was intending to vote. And I said then that I was thinking I was going to have to abstain at full council because my head said option C, but my heart said option E. But as I listened to the debate at full council, I did vote on full council for option E because I did find the arguments particularly compelling. Not because perhaps option E is the strongest on paper now. If we're looking for a unitary to service in 2025, then indeed option C might be the best option. But I think what we're looking for is a unitary that will last us for, possibly 50 years into the future. And I think that the inevitable growth in Huntingdonshire to do with the Oxcam Arc, with EWR, the A421, Operation Fairfax, and also with the new town at Tempsford, which isn't currently part of our district. But I think, as a St Neots member, I think I would highly support any solution that had the whole of that St Neots, Tempsford corridor as under a single council, whether that meant, Tempsford coming to Huntingdonshire or perhaps even St Neots going to Bedfordshire. I'm not suggesting that tonight, but, I think we have to consider that as a really important development in the future. If Tempsford does end up being part of Huntingdonshire, I think it's a strong argument. But even if it doesn't, they talk about 40,000 new houses in Tempsford, but inevitably there's going to be a massive growth in housing in the southern part of our district, around St Neots, along EWR, which I've always said is an opportunity to unlock rural land for property development. So we're going to see the face of this district change. I think that option E gives us the chance to be part of the Cambridge economy, but be a different part of it and have our own identity. I think we always have. And I think when I look at option C, I think from the start, I think we can say that neither Cambridge City or South Cambs particularly wanted us as partners. So we're happy to be partners with them, but have our own identity. So for me, tonight, I'm very minded to vote for option E, although I haven't made my mind up yet. I think it's a more future-proof scenario. It's a structure which is robust enough for tomorrow and just not for 2025. And also, I'm very minded to listen to the views of my colleagues at full council. They didn't all vote for option E, and there were some very good arguments in favour of option C as well. But I was convinced at full council enough to vote for option E, and I think it reflects the views of the vast majority of Huntingdonshire residents. Now, I represent St Neots. St Neots hasn't always had the best relationship with Huntingdonshire. My last act as Mayor of St Neots, I think as Councillor Pitt described the other night, is that we voted not to fly the Huntingdonshire flag in St Neots, which I'm rather embarrassed by now. So if, when we've come to the conclusion, if we do end up with option E, I will happily attend the raising of the Huntingdonshire flag over Huntingdon, and even possibly salute it if that's it. I will bend my knee to the Huntingdonshire option. So at the moment, my intention is to vote for option E, not because it's the easiest choice on paper, but because it's the right choice for the long-term future of our community. Our council has made its preference clear, and my heart at the moment is with that preference because it envisions Huntingdonshire that is ready to stand on its own and thrive. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. Who would like to speak next? Councillor Kerr?
Thank you, Chair. I want to speak this evening about local government reorganisation, LGR, in relation to the events of the past week. Many of you know I have always spoken very highly of our MP, Ben Obi-Stjekti, and I've known his hard work and acknowledged it. And I found him very supportive, and I've given him a lot of respect. However, when I heard his speech in Parliament about LGR, I was genuinely dismayed. Over recent weeks, I've been working closely, cross-party, with colleagues from County Council on the A141 St Ives Improvement Scheme. We've worked collaboratively, and that's gained a lot of public support. In those discussions, we also talked about LGR, and it appeared that there was a shared cross-party understanding that presenting a united position would give a strong, clear message to government about where Huntingdonshire stands. I felt encouraged by that, and I felt positive. All of that positivity was lost when I heard the MP's contribution. Political game playing on an issue of such significance is not only unhelpful, it's offensive. I can only assume that that was an attempt to discredit the joint administration, and it was done with an eye on the next election. First, I want to make something absolutely clear. The decision to explore a business case for option E was made by the joint administration under the leadership of Councillor Comboy. This was a local decision rooted firmly in local priorities. Yet the way Ben has been presenting it on social media, you would think option E was his concept and his initiative, and that simply is not the case. Secondly, and this has truly appalled me, highly respected, hard-working members of our joint administration who voted for option E were accused of basing that choice on AI. I was shocked by that accusation. These are colleagues I hold in the highest regard. I have listened carefully to their arguments for option C, and they were all very well thought out, very well presented, and made in good conscience. We live in a democratic society, and council leaders are expected to make difficult decisions after serious consideration. To dismiss their judgment as the work of an algorithm is insulting and deeply unfair. By releasing that parliamentary speech on social media on the very day of our full council vote, the MP created a storm that made residents believe that if councillors did not vote for option E, they were somehow betraying the electorate. As a result, some of our colleagues who voted for option C have since received awful comments online. That, in my view, is unacceptable. I sincerely hope that they receive an apology from our MP. I also want to place on record my thanks to Councillor Comboy for allowing all members of the joint administration and the Cabinet full freedom to vote as they believe right. That is what leadership looks like. I made my own position clear last week. However, I'm still leaning towards option E, and not because anyone pushed or pressurised me into it. I understand the merits of option C, and I appreciate the thoughtful arguments made by those who supported it. However, I'm still leaning towards option E because it offers a stronger business case, certainly than option D, with a future-proof way forward for our Huntingdonshire and for the county as a whole.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. Who'd like to speak next?
Thank you, Chair. I abstained at full council as I wanted to hear the views from all the councillors present, and I wanted to fully digest what was said and reflect on those words before making my decision this evening. Every day I open my curtains and there in front of me, not 200 yards away, is the Peterborough border. I can see the cathedral, the football ground, and on New Year's Eve, the whole city letting off fireworks. It is very, very close for both myself and the majority of my residents. However, overwhelmingly, the voices I've heard from them have been that they don't want to join with Peterborough, even with its very, very close proximity to us. The town town and parish councils, the full council, and majority of my residents are saying the same thing. They all want E. I am going to listen to the debate this evening. I'm going to listen to the views of all the other cabinet members before I make my decision, but those views are going to need to be a lot louder than the views of my residents.
Thank you very much, Councillor Howell. Who would like to speak next? Councillor McElbrough?
So it might just be that my son doing his GCSE mocks have the words, "show your working out," ringing in my ears. So that's what I wanted to do, rather than necessarily talking about the two options. I think one of the things that we need to recall with what is in front of us is that leadership is not about perfection, but accountability. And unlike a question in a maths exam, there is no immediately right or wrong answer to the problem posed to us by government. It has therefore worried me slightly to see some of the online reaction to the options in front of us. Somehow not voting for what someone else thinks is the correct choice makes you a traitor and somehow disloyal to Huntingdonshire. We are not tribally watching a football match. If at any point someone has a view that one option is better than another, they should be able to debate and persuade, not resort to threats. On a happier note, I was delighted that the debate in Chamber last week was far more constructive. And I've heard from a number of people, including this evening Councillor Ferguson, whose final decision was heavily influenced by the points put forward. It has been asked on social media and in other places why certain people abstained. I just want to make it clear that abstention was not avoidance. It was Cabinet members' respect for democratic debate and a commitment to listening before deciding. There is a concept in lean software development decision-making called the last responsible moment. It asks the question, when do I need to make this decision? The closer you are to the point of implementation, the more information you have, the fewer assumptions you must make, the better opportunities for external factors to have been identified, and for you to have worked through the alternatives. This evening is the very last responsible moment, so there will be no abstaining now. I want to repeat the message that I have heard everywhere. This has been a poor Westminster process that feels, at best, rushed. This once-in-a-generation decision is so open to political gerrymandering at every level. The flexibility of the criteria remains unclear, with contradictory messaging, and the final decision falls to one minister, who has changed once during this process already, and it means it's too opaque. Our system of representative democracy means that district councillors are elected to wards whose residents they are expected to make decisions for based on the views and interests of those residents. In this process, do those views or best interests agree with, compete with, or collide with those views from somewhere else? How can a good holistic decision be made with such competing viewpoints? That all said, I am proud of how HDC has conducted the process, and I will reiterate the comments that have already been made by other comments. We have given every councillor the opportunity to vote for every option. Councillor Martin quoted Plato last week. To remind you, the heaviest penalty for declining to rule is to be ruled by someone inferior to yourself. I get that this is a large part of the appeal of option E, but those words reminded me why we needed to form the joint administration back in 2022. I was also interested to see and hear that in the debate, the Conservatives repeatedly made reference to how HDC has grown stronger over the last few years and has thrived in comparison to other areas, and this has made E a realistic prospect. I'm sure that admitting to the success of the joint administration must be difficult for them, and with an election due in May, I am very glad that they did so.
Thank you very much, Councillor McAbra. Who would like to go next? Councillor Harvey?
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I just want to reiterate some of the comments that were made at full council and put on record our thanks to all the officers for their hard work in getting us to this point. It's been a mammoth task and we do recognise that. Thank you so much. Like Councillor Jennings, I'm an accountant at heart, and so I looked at the facts and figures in lots of details, which led my head to option C. However, my heart didn't agree. So I've looked at this from a different perspective, and one that wasn't really talked about at full council. I thought about what government have said regarding Project Fairfax and RAF Whitton's importance, and I thought about Tempsford. Both of these are things Huntingdonshire could deliver and would be excited about under option E, and I'm not sure unitaries with either Cambridge or Peterborough as the main focus would work as well as a laser-focused Huntingdonshire. I've also been concerned about the diversity of councillors in the new unitaries, and I asked that we include a statement to that effect in our first letter to government. I firmly believe that option E goes a long way to addressing those concerns, keeping democracy close to home and residents with contactable councillors. On balance, I think that these other factors are outweighing the figures for me, and so I'm minded to support option E tonight.
Thank you very much. Councillor Harvey, who else would like to speak? Councillor Sanderson?
Thank you very much, Chair. I thought our debate at full council last week was, excuse me, one of the most critical decisions we've made for a long time. I thought it was very high. There was excellent contributions from all sides of the chamber. And although members had strong views on their preferred options, and the way that other local authorities and members have approached this subject, it was presented in a very respectful way. I was queasy about some of the ideas I've heard. I think it's option D that splits Huntingdon and Godmanchester, which I found a little bit concerning. As we know, the Minister for Local Government in February suggested that proposals need to align to 6 main criteria. I'm not going to repeat them all here tonight. I will mention option 6, however, which says new unitary council should enable stronger community engagement and deliver genuine opportunity for neighbourhood empowerment, which I think is the reason why all of us are sat around this table this evening and why members participated as they did last week. It's very important to us. We want to do exactly that, deliver good things for our community and empower our neighbourhoods. Clearly, the current system doesn't do that, as we well know. So I think that the two options for me, two standout options, are C and E. I am inclined to look at option E as being the most favourable. We become a single standalone unitary authority in our own right. A second authority would then cover Peterborough, Fenland and East Cambridgeshire, and a third would cover Cambridge City and South Cambridgeshire. And just reading from the business case, and those responding felt that this was the best opportunity for effective governance and efficient and coherent service delivery, reflecting the needs and aspirations of stakeholders and partners. It would be the best for the local economy, create economies of scale. And it did perform very strongly, protects our local identity, maintains existing boundaries. I think we have to be realistic, though, that option E will be difficult in some ways to deliver, to make the population numbers work. We've had some concerned comments from our colleagues in Bedfordshire about the boundaries. I won't repeat them here. But I think it also shows that the councils that have a proven track record at delivering growth, it's an exception to the guidance due to the high volume of that growth, but it allows the ability to concentrate on some specific economic areas. I think also the strong defence focus, and Chair, you were at a parliamentary delegation recently. We had support from our parliamentary delegation, and the consideration of Tempsford's growth as a new town, I think, adds to the reasoning behind option E. I have some sympathy for option C. I think it will provide place-based solutions, again, economies of scale. I think the electoral reform arrangements probably are stronger on that option than any of the others. But I think throughout this process, our biggest concern must be two things: social care costs. I think they'll account for about 40% of each unitary authority budget, and we have to maintain a safe and legal delivery of this crucial service. But I think most importantly, LGR will lead to significant changes to our greatest asset, and that's our staff. May result in a drop of morale and capacity, a lot of unknowns floating around at the moment. And to quote directly from the business case, it's important that the change is managed effectively and the strong engagement maintained to ensure that all of our workforce are on board throughout this process. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Sanderson. Who hasn't yet spoken? Councillor Davenport-Ray and Councillor Wakeford? They're going to decide amongst themselves who's going to go first. Councillor Davenport-Ray.
I'll go. Many of the comments I heard at full council last week chime with the same concerns that I feel. So it was really helpful to have input from all of the political groups on that evening before we came to discuss it here at Cabinet. So we have 5 options before us this evening. And during full council, colleagues from both sides of the chamber made very convincing and evidence-based arguments against options A, B, and D. And I agree with all of their points on both the social impacts and the financial aspects, so I won't repeat them again here. But this leaves me with 2 options, C and E, and the business cases for both demonstrate financial sustainability, even without boundary changes. When option E was first suggested to us, I was dubious about the financial case, but I think we do have the evidence before us now that demonstrates that that is a possibility. C and E also include compelling evidence of travel to work patterns and community social links. From the full council debate and vote last week, we can see that these 2 options are the most favored by our councillors who represent local people who voted for them to represent their best interest. In addition to the financial data, though, I think there are a few extra things that we need to consider. The first is the feedback that we receive from the public. The second is conclusions we can draw from recent decisions that the minister has made in the last week. And the third is the potential impact on our mayoral combined authority. First, I think the results of our public consultation and the focus groups has been really compelling. So over 3,000 people responded from across the region, and I really took 4 key things away from what the public told us. The first was the public supports changes to our councils, especially where it leads to better council services. So reorganization is something that we need to do, keeping local people at the heart of our decision making. Number 2, the public wants local councillors that understand their local area. And when they were asked, their number 1 priority was genuine local knowledge, regular community contact, and practical accessibility to local people. The third thing they told us was that successful councils, from the public's perspective, respect the practical geography of their daily life. So how people live, where they work, where they shop, where they access their services. And the public think that good councils don't impose boundaries based on administrative convenience or some theoretical efficiency models. For example, 46% of the Hunts residents said they shop and socialize within the district, and then 38% going to Cambridge and South Camps. So this was support leaning towards an option C approach. 38% of Hunts residents work within the district, but a further 32% of our residents work in places completely outside our county, in London, Bedford, Northampton, highlighting just how different Huntingdonshire is and unique, sort of an intersection of economic regions. The fourth thing that I think residents told us is that people living in rural areas have higher concerns about being overlooked if they were in a large unitary authority. 76% of Hunt's responses were concerned about this, and if you look at South Camps or Cambridge City, it's more around 50%. So people in Huntingdonshire are quite worried about that. On balance, the survey responses from people in Huntingdonshire seem to support option E, geography. We also have new evidence to consider. Last week, government made initial decisions on some of the council areas that are going down the fast track route of local government reorganization. So we now know realities about the shape and size of unitary councils that the minister is willing to take forward to consultation. That includes proposed boundary changes in Norfolk, Suffolk, Essex, Hampshire, East Sussex, and Brighton. So we certainly should not shy away from proposing boundary changes if we truly believe that that would result in the best outcome for our local residents. Now, I represent part of St. Neots that is quite literally a crossroads. The A1M goes north, south, the A428 goes east-west, the East Coast Main Line goes north and south, and the future East-West Rail will connect us from Oxford and Milton Keynes and Cambridge in the east. In fair weather, in my ward, I can quite literally see 4 different council areas. I can see Huntingdonshire, Bedford Borough, Central Beds, and South Cambs, and St. Neots is being squeezed on all sides from development. Much of it out of our control because it sits over a border. From Dennybrook to Little Barton and Tempsford to Wintringham, our current boundaries do not serve the economic and social needs of the people that live in St. Neots. By suggesting that current boundaries should be maintained, government has really missed the opportunity to take a nuanced and a long-term approach to the St. Neots area. The crossroads of St. Neots needs room to grow with one council where local people can control their own destiny and, most importantly, moderate the pressures on their own schools, their own roads, and their own GP surgeries. On this basis, I believe that the proposed boundary review mentioned in option E is what St. Neots residents would want us to put forward to government. There's a third consideration that I didn't hear mentioned in full council, and that's about the impact on our combined authority. I truly believe that multiple voices on the board of the combined authority are essential. This is especially in the case in our region where we have very different contrasts in urban areas versus rural populations. Pursuing option E would ensure an extra voice at that combined authority board table, a third local authority. And we cannot lose sight of just how much funding and power the government is indicating that they will direct at mayoral combined authorities in the future. Overall, I'm incredibly proud that our council has taken what time there is available to gather facts and make the best evidence-driven choices about the geographic shape of our future council. Our officers have really done us proud, especially Beth Gray, and the tone of our political debate has been really professional and respectful. The elephant in the room is that, sadly, if the Labour government were serious about streamlining local government, this conversation would be about major investment in social care funding. We're reforming the wrong part of local government. While councils struggle to support looked-after children and vulnerable adults, this tactic is both unhelpful and uncaring. In summary, I'm minded to support option E, based on the balance of evidence before us and the positive future it would open up for Hunt's residents and businesses. I also hope that our council can use this opportunity to express our disappointment in the flawed and short-sighted process that we're being asked to follow. Reorganization could have been a pivotal, once-in-a-generation opportunity to make local government truly work for local people, with sufficient funding to support social care. True localism is powerful. Bigger is not necessarily better, and those opportunities have been missed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davenport-Ray. Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you, Chair. And thanks, colleagues, for giving me a benefit of opportunity of reflecting on what everyone else has said already this evening. I'll endeavour not to repeat too much of it. What we have flagged already, and I will acknowledge in repetition, is that there were questions why some of us didn't vote at full council. Most of us in Cabinet didn't. And as I mentioned when I did speak at full council, my intention was to listen, as I have done as well remotely, to the scrutiny panel that we convened to offer input as well, and to reflect further prior to coming here, reflecting on contributions from around the table prior to making the executive decision, which is the one that ultimately matters this evening in what we put forward. Some colleagues around the table have remarked on full council and its tone. I think I was particularly heartfelt that there were positive comments about the concept of local government reorganisation from across the chamber, though clearly not without caveats, if we can put it like that. But just reflecting, I suppose, on the core purpose. We do spend a non-trivial amount of time navigating relationships between tiers of authorities. That is true I think, everywhere with the so-called two-tier split, and I have lost count of how many tiers we have, depending what you count in different bits of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. But just reflecting in terms of my own cabinet portfolio on everything from affordable house building to town regeneration activities, if we did hold county levers as well as district levers, our life would be simpler, quicker, and residents would notice the difference, whether in more affordable houses built sooner or more vibrant public spaces used better, to give just two examples that relate to work we are actively engaged on as a district. That is the whole point of being a unitary authority, that you have control over a broader span of local governance locally. At council, of course, we heard complaints about speed as well as how it's being done, and Councillor Devonport-Ray has rightly flagged there are a number of other challenges as well that LGR is not purporting to be a panacea to, and work is underway in parallel to tackle social care. Enormous challenges it is, and would become jolly near top of our agendas were we in unitary authority. But in terms of speed, I suppose my reflection on comments on that is that we could probably have double the length of time, or even an unlimited amount of time. And I'm not convinced we would have been able to agree across all of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough on a single way forward. We did start this process, as has been remarked already this evening, with the optimism that should there be possibility of that, we would find it, and I'm sure we would have done had there been, but there wasn't. So I think there's also a broader analysis I've made reference to previously as well. Of us as a country in recent years having got extremely good at planning things, consulting about things, planning them again, and not actually delivering. So I do feel there is at least something to be said about government pushing us to move at a pace faster than we might have chosen for ourselves. But that is not to knock the very many valid questions and concerns about details that creates. I was minded to just reflect on all of the options in turn, if you'll indulge me, Chair. In a spirit of, I suppose, showing my working, how I would do in the mock GCSE papers in Councillor Mickelberg's household, I suppose I'll leave to him to advise me on. Of the two unitary models, Councillor Conboy rightly flagged there are 2- and 3-way splits. Of the two, I'd start with B, which makes sense to me, if not starting at the top of the alphabet. But this option is the one that places Cambridge and South Cambs together, and then the rest of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough together as well, conscious of the potential inaccessibility of the alphabet soup that we use. So I will spell a few of these out. And that so-called Greater Cambridge unitary would be significantly smaller than its partner. That said, the city of Cambridge and its surroundings have quite a lot going for them, I don't think is an overstatement. And so in terms of size and other factors, it may be slightly unbalanced, but I think it's abundantly clear from the paperwork available to us, option B has a credible business case. And I think it's clear that both parts of that unitary could make a success of it if that's what comes to pass. I think there must, though, be at least a hypothetical scenario in which government might feel that the scale of the smaller council of the two in that split was insufficient, in which case we'd need a model which places Greater Cambridge in a larger authority. It would need a further partner. And the other two-way splits, option A and option C, both fit that bill. In A, Greater Cambridge would go east into East Cambs, and we'd pair with Fenland and Peterborough. In option C, Greater Cambridge would merge west here into Huntingdonshire, with Peterborough, Fenland and East Cambs joining together. On the data available to us, the business cases do look viable for both. I do have questions about option A, not least because it appears to be being put forward only as a result of decision by county council colleagues prior to benefit of its business case, which is not how we've chosen to do things here, I'm pleased to say. But for me, C is the clear winner between those two choices. It works economically, it works socially, purely practically. We already have major infrastructure closely linking parts of Huntingdonshire into Cambridge from the guided busway, making it rather difficult to realise as you get off the bus from Cambridge and St Ives that you might be in a different local authority area. The new A14, as well as the repurposed old A14 as well, on the old A14 footprint, providing enhanced local links for us with public transport opportunities beyond those that we're currently utilising, but we're already running extra Tiger buses along them. And of course, we've got the prospect of major infrastructure on the horizon as well, not least prospect of East West Rail travelling through Huntingdonshire, exciting developments just beyond our border with Universal Studios, Tempsford even closer. So I think at the centre of economic gravity is looking west from Cambridge, certainly in terms of future opportunities. So for me, option C is a real contender and must be for us and for all of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. I think, frankly, it's a stronger one than the vote at our own full council might be taken to suggest, because as councils, each of us are only able to put forward one model. It might be tempting to wish we could put forward multiples as backups, but with every council doing the same as well, it's a difficult enough decision for ministers who I do not envy. I think having even more would make this process unworkable. So councillors at our full council weighed in on one to the detriment of C, but I would underlining that I think that's an extremely strong option and one that I'm certainly have been weighing significantly in my mind. But as well as the two-way split, we can split Cambridgeshire and Peterborough three ways, and option D and E provide versions of that. Option D is being proposed, as I think you noted at the start, Chair, by our northern neighbours, Peterborough and Fenland. Whereas option E is the one we made the decision to explore ourselves, as Councillor Kerr rightly reminded us. We worked up a full business case when we established that there could be a credible one, having tested it. I think there are obviously a number of good questions about option D, if I can put it like that, and a number of speakers at our full council put it a little more bluntly than that. But I do have every confidence that if it was picked as government's preferred option, we would be able to use the consultation process to address those. I've no doubt, like all the options on the table that councils across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough have been considering, it could be made to work. And I do think that at least some of the arguments advanced against it are a little over the top. We've heard a particular concern from Conservative members here in our chamber that houses would be built in Huntingdonshire by a merged council. Their colleague in Parliament, who Councillor Kerr has quoted, used a stronger language, again talking about dumping houses in Huntingdonshire. But I did reflect that only within the past fortnight, Conservatives here in Huntingdonshire were pressing us to go faster in meeting our housing targets, including on affordable housing ones. And I think they were right to hold our feet to the fire on that, because our term of administration, as we well know, colleagues, has seen record affordable house building for Huntingdonshire, but that's not enough. And if you're on the housing register, if you need a house, I don't think you hugely much care what the borders of the authority were that chose to build it. The relevance is in the fact that it's a house and that it's somewhere to live. That said, I do find option E, the other of our three-way models, compelling. It is perhaps a stretch against some of the government's factors in the short term, but no more than the other three-way split on the table. And as others have discussed this evening, as we've discussed more passionately and fulsomely at full council last week, so I won't repeat, but it does allow Huntingdonshire to unleash its potential in a whole variety of ways. I would say, though, that doesn't mean I'm persuaded by all of the arguments advanced in favour of option E. I think some of the protests against the very possibility of people from places outside of Huntingdonshire and their representatives being able to participate in a democratic process, making decisions with us that affect our area, do seem to overlook slightly the fact that we have more tiers of local governance than we can count, as I've noted, and members at county council, at the combined authority from beyond Huntingdonshire already make decisions that affect us in our area with us. So the principle already exists, if I can put it like that, of people not standing in Huntingdonshire being involved in decision making about here. So we can do that in future if we need to. We can work collaboratively as part of a merged unitary, if that is what government picks. And I share Councillor Kerr's discomfort with some of the language used about treachery if members don't back Huntingdonshire. I think discussion at our full council was heartfelt in many cases, and I think for good reason. I do agree with Councillor Kerr that our Member of Parliament overdid it somewhat, but we do care about local government structures, not for their own sake, but to have structures that do let us unleash the potential of our areas, our residents, our communities, our businesses. But I do think that members supporting C and members, had they voted for other options, could still have reached that conclusion while understanding and backing our local area and not being traitors to it. But certainly, I'm minded to support option C this evening. From what I've heard, Chair, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wakeford. It's tough going last. I'm going to speak now, and then I'm going to open it up because there may be things that we haven't covered that between us we would still like to cover. I'm going to take us back to the beginning of this journey, and I would like to put on record my thanks to my fellow council leaders. It was not easy, all of us sitting together at the beginning of this journey, particularly as none of us expected in December that this was going to be included in a white paper. The first time we sort of had a proper conversation was very early January, and it was still very early days. We've had a bit of a checkered history as a group of leaders. I have to say, we have pulled together across the whole of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough because all of us understood the importance of trying to get this right for our residents. We were united in that view. It did become apparent fairly early on that actually our geography alone makes it very difficult to come up with a single solution, because depending on where you live and what geography is around you, there are some parts of our authority that would be saying, well, why are you not talking to Northamptonshire? And why are you not talking to bits of Lincolnshire? And why are you not talking to bits of Hertfordshire? Because depending on where you live depends on probably where you look for your services, where you spend your social time, and it makes a difference to people's lives. Our leaders, our chief execs have also been pivotal, as well as their staff teams, in also working in that really collaborative way. And again, I think it's been challenging for all of us. I think it would be fair to say we all care passionately about our place. And occasionally we've all got our elbows out a little bit because everybody thinks their place is incredibly special. And of course, every place is. We've got 7 councils that believe their place is the most special of all of the councils. And we are all trying to do the right thing. But our officer teams have been fantastic in working across those different political frameworks, across different organisations, to try and give us the very best opportunity to come up with some business cases that we could genuinely look at and test. So having started with business cases A to C, the late arrival of D And then rather a lot of changing things happening on our patch meant that we then had the opportunity to look at E in a way that we thought probably we couldn't bring that forward earlier. The lights have gone off, but I think that's because we haven't moved sufficiently. So somebody's going to go and wave their arms under the sensor. Thank you, Councillor Harvey. For those people that are really wondering what had changed, because I've had this conversation with people who've said, you know, I really, really like C. I think C is a really strong case, and we've heard that tonight. But what changed to make you think that E could be put on the table? You've heard us talk about Project Fairfax. For those who are thinking, well, I don't know what Project Fairfax is, this is the making of RAF Witten, which is the geospatial intelligence headquarters for the RAF and for the UK, into making that stronger and having a defence cluster that also reaches out across Molesworth and Oldcombe, all on our patch. But it also, if you looked at it wider, it does reach out to Mildenhall and Lakenheath. It arguably reaches up to Wittering, and it arguably reaches down south towards bits of London. The other changes that have come on stream, so this is always the challenge when you make these decisions. We live in a very moving landscape at this point in time. We also have the new local growth plan that our strategic authorities, mayoral authorities, have been asked to produce, working directly with government, and that includes a North Hunts cluster, which again looks at delivering Witten, but it looks at advanced manufacturing, and it makes a really clear case for why that needs to be a government priority and an opportunities area. You also then look at the fact that we have a local plan in development. I know it's a little controversial. There are some who think that we shouldn't be doing that. But by doing that, we know that we will be able to guarantee a 5-year housing supply. We know that we will be able to speak with certainty about that delivery, and we are planning for future growth, all of which is really important to give our residents some certainty. Universal Studios across the border in Bedfordshire is really pivotal for us in terms of supply chain, future employment, and potential other spin-offs in terms of innovation, because a lot of the things that they do at Universal are innovative technologies that also play really well to the skill sets and the kind of companies and businesses we have in our patch. East-West Rail will be pivotal. It will open up new commuting routes that don't currently exist. And we're still talking about bringing Oldcombe Rail Station on stream. That suddenly allows us to grow in a way that we haven't necessarily anticipated previously. And certainly the fact that East West Rail will now intersect directly with the North-South line, again, opens up new commuting routes that really benefit us in Huntingdonshire. And yes, it'll benefit across the border too, and the station will be technically in Bedfordshire. But as we've heard today, depending on where you live, actually the lines on the map are just part of our visual landscape. You can't tell where those lines are, and people don't see them in their day-to-day lives. It's just how we live and get on with the day job. Tempsford is pivotal, huge new town. I may have upset my neighbours who I think thought that we were trying to steal Tempsford. That's certainly absolutely not. I'm putting it on record. That is not our intention. But it does worry me that actually trying to deliver a new town of such scale and such significance and with such a potential impact, to try and do that over 3 authorities and to try and do it when the nearest big settlement happens to be our largest settlement, not to do that in a coordinated way and possibly by looking at boundary changes, for me makes little sense. If that means Tempsford goes outside of Huntingdonshire, so be it. But actually it's too important for us not to get it right. And the impact on our existing residents, as well as those villages that Tempsford will include, will be significant. We're continuing to do work with Homes England and looking at some of our other sites. So again, this is a changing landscape that we're operating in. We have a really strong track record of growth. We heard our opposition talk about it, and it is building on the foundations that they laid, but we have pushed hard for 4 years, and that's a real change for us. That means that we will have better financial stability, and we know that our neighbours are equally worrying about that. But in terms of why that makes E a more viable option than when we first talked about it right at the very beginning, actually, we now have a business case that demonstrates E is deliverable along with C, along with A, B and D. Our overview and scrutiny panel worked really hard, and they have had some criticism as to why that evening they didn't come to any conclusions. I think they were fantastic not to come to any conclusions. They equally wanted to have an open mind. They wanted to ask questions. They wanted to ensure that all of the decision making that our full council needed to make was founded on having really good advice from the officer team and from the consultants team. I think that was pivotal to underpinning our debate on the evening, and I really want to thank Overview and Scrutiny. And it was a joint committee, so that's a particular challenge because it's pulling people together from both panels, and they did a sterling job. And I think a council did us proud. Like you, I listened intensely. I wrote copious notes. I really didn't know where we were going before I got in that room. And I really hadn't made any decision myself about where we were going. I genuinely wanted to listen. I was really impressed by the consideration people had given for all of the options. And whilst there are some options which clearly are less popular than others, people had genuinely engaged with the process. And that's all we asked of people. Please use the business cases to make an informed decision about how you think we should reorganise. I do worry about option D, because I really would like to see Peterborough reach the status that I think it deserves, and it deserves to be our principal city outside of Cambridge. Now, some might say it already is, but in terms of the ambitions and aspirations for Peterborough, if it could genuinely overhaul its economy, I think it could be a most fantastic flagship city. I'm not sure that D particularly delivers that, but I will wait to see where we go this evening. In terms of place identity, I have heard my fellow leaders in East Cambridgeshire and Fenland talk about their local identity and whether they feel that they are Fen looking or East Anglian looking, or actually that they look within their own boundaries. And these are real challenges for communities and where people see themselves belonging. And I've heard City and South Cams. I very unkindly keep referring to the donut and the jam, but every time I look at the image, it's the fact that you have South Cambridgeshire surrounding the city because that's how it's grown up. But it makes no sense for them not to work together, even if they then partner with somebody else. That's a natural pairing, and I understand why that feels very comfortable. I also understand the absolute significance of Cambridge City in terms of being a national and international driver for our economy, for innovation, and for future research. So actually making sure we get this decision right for all of our constituent partners is the thing that has kept me awake at night. Because much as I'd like to tell you that if you cut me in half, I only care about Huntingdonshire, those of you who've been on this journey with me over the recent months will know that at every turn, I often stand in front of the map in the office and I'm looking at bits of it and thinking, well, it'll work well over here, but will it work well over there? And if that bit works well, what's the impact somewhere else? Because this decision isn't just about us, it's about creating viable unitary authorities right the way across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. There are some real challenges. There are perceptions around what government will or will not accept. I really like the reference to doing mock exams at the moment. I too have a child going through that, but some of our officers will tell you that they will be very pleased after this evening when I stop using the phrase, can we answer the exam question? And does it answer the exam question? Because I think it's the thing that, again, has kept us awake at night, because we genuinely want to be able to put forward whatever case we pick. We want to be certain it gives us the best opportunity to shape, and for that we need to answer the exam questions set by the Secretary of State. Our real challenge with that is the Secretary of State set the exam questions, but then gave us nuances about how we might meet them. So the first decision the Secretary of State made about Surrey said, well, I'm going to split it like this because I want authorities of around about this size, but it is not the blueprint for everywhere else. That wasn't quite the phrase, I can't remember the phrase, but in other words, it doesn't determine all future decisions. There's been lots quoted about the size of authorities, and people have got very hung up about that. The Secretary of State and the ministers have been very clear that whilst they gave us an indication of size, you can have smaller. You would just need to justify why that was a viable, sustainable option. Having listened to Overview and Scrutiny and weighed the evidence that we had put before us, I am very clear that of the two business cases we put forward as a council, business cases C and E, both are deliverable. They are different. They do have different strengths. I listened intensely to the people who told me very logically and quite rightly that C was the stronger option in many ways, because there is something about the logic of the maths in C that sort of resonates. But I also looked at E in terms of its potential, and it's a slightly different proposition again. It's less conventional, but it is absolutely deliverable. And I think it could be a deliverable option for us. So just to before, as I round off, and then we'll go back and just check there's nothing else that people would like to say that reflects the conversations we've heard over the last couple of months. We have asked our towns and parishes their views. Now, they haven't all met yet, so this is not a complete list of views, but of those that have written back to us to express their views, as of today, this is where I just need to find my bit of paper. As of today, we've had 29 responses favouring E, 13 responses favouring C, 1 favouring A, and 1 favouring B, and none favouring D. So the feedback from our towns and parishes is predominantly at this stage, bearing in mind we haven't heard from every single town and parish, is predominantly E. But there clearly are some that are also persuaded by C.
Some of those councils chose 2 preferences. There were several that chose C and E, so they were also split, like our full council was slightly split as well. So they weren't all single preferences, but I think the support for E is clear.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson, and that's quite right, because the emails have come back into my inbox, and I have read with great interest. And equally, it would genuinely be fair to say our towns and parishes have struggled with the same debates that we have struggled with in full council, the conversations we've had in the months leading up to the development of the business cases. And I think it would be fair to say in many cases it hasn't been clear cut. What I wanted to say as I conclude is that I don't think we would have chosen to have so many moving parts of the system at this point. I'm reflecting we've got local government reorganisation, we've got changes to the integrated care system, we've got changes around social care, changes around special educational needs, changes around just the budget, I suspect, will make other changes that we will need to accommodate. What I am convinced of is I am absolutely convinced that whatever option the Secretary of State chooses, whilst I may be minded to have my own preference, and at the moment I'm minded to support E, whatever option the Secretary of State chooses, I am confident that on behalf of residents and our workforce that we can make it work. As I say, I think some are stronger than others, there are some that I think are easier to deliver than others, and I have my own preferences. But whatever we choose tonight, and then whatever the Secretary of State chooses from the options put forward across the 7 authorities, I genuinely believe we can make it work for residents and our workforce. So I'm going to pause there. Does anybody else want to come back in and raise any issues that we've heard throughout the debate for the last couple of months, that we've heard overview and scrutiny, or that we've heard of council? Because if not, then I'm going to move towards a vote. But I'm very happy to take some more comments. Councillor Ferguson.
Just wanted to express my disappointment that all the councils have come together to make, all the councils at all levels to make this decision, but County Council voted for option A and we haven't seen the full business case for option A, which seems a little curious, as we tonight are supposed to consider all of the options. The first council to make a decision was the County Council before all the options were on the table, and at the end of this process that option isn't really on the table either, and I find that incredibly disappointing and slightly disrespectful. Just a comment, Chair.
Noted, Councillor Ferguson. Did anybody else want to make any comments? Then I'm going to put a proposal. We've got a series of recommendations which are all laid out in detail on page 4. I'm going to propose, and I had spoken to the monitoring officer before we sat down this evening just to check that this was going to be compliant, but I will wait for her to nod vigorously in a moment. I'm going to propose one of the options and then move to a vote, because I believe that will probably help us then to make a decision. I'm going to ask the monitoring officer, she's nodding and putting her thumbs up, and then we can take the rest of the recommendations. So in other words, we will select an option Does that find favour? Are you
Chair,
content
I don't
with that?
understand. I don't understand the process.
So if
Can you
I was
repeat
to
it?
suggest option Y, there isn't an option Y for those of you at home who are now panicking that you didn't read option
F, Chair.
Y. But if I was to suggest option Y and somebody else was to propose it, we could all vote for option Y. If you support Y, you vote for it. If you don't vote for it. There may be people who then wish to say what they would have preferred to vote for, but I'm trying to make this as streamlined and as straightforward. Does that find favour? Councillor Ferguson.
Can I ask a procedural question then? If you're going to propose an option, do you require a seconder? Because I'm thinking that there might not be. I'm presuming, I don't know. Maybe there will be a seconder for all the options. But if that's the case, then an option, we won't vote on that option. Is that correct?
That's correct. So I'm going up. So just to help you, there isn't a Y, so don't panic. I'm going to propose option E. Does that help answer
Chair, I
the
will
question?
second that proposal.
Okay. So we have a proposer and a seconder, and I'm watching Anita because it's really important we get this process right because it must be compliant. Can I have a show of hands all in favour of option E? Okay. And those against? And any abstention? Do you wish to declare which option you might have chosen? It's entirely in your gift. You don't have to. You don't have to, Councillor Mickleborough. But I'm aware that at full council, everybody made a declaration. I don't want to feel that you're being treated any differently.
No, absolutely. I think I might upset Councillor Ferguson, who's still rooting for someone to throw a wild card onto the table. No, so my view is that if you look at representative democracy, I look at full council. Full council put in options E and option C. I think that a point should be made in favour of option C. I also look at the three councils that sit within my ward, where two of them have preferred option C, and therefore in interest of representing their views and the views of residents that they represent, I would have brought option C to the table.
Thank you, Councillor Mickleborough. So that we have made a overriding decision this evening for E. The majority vote is for option E to be submitted on behalf of this council. So you also then have the rest of the recommendations before you, which are A to I on the paper of page 4. Are you happy that we take those on block? Okay, can I just, if I propose them, can I have a seconder, please? Okay, Councillor Sanderson, but thank you, Councillor Harvey. Can I have a show of all those in favour? Oh, hang on a minute. My monitoring officer is just going to make sure I've got it right.
Thank you. Just as a point of clarity, you are now moving to the recommendations as set out in the report on block. However, I think it would be helpful to point out for the chamber here this evening and those at home that the option E is considered as the substantive motion for the purposes of this vote. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Can I have a show of all those in favour of the recommendations on 4, including the substantive motion for E? Thank you. That is carried unanimously. In which case, can I thank you, because it has been a very long journey getting to this evening. We will now be able to submit our preferred option through to government. So again, just as a reminder, we do that. The deadline is the 28th, so it's almost upon us. There will be a single letter submitted on behalf of all 7 councils stating each of the preferences that each council has chosen. We will then wait for the Secretary of State to consider all of the business cases that will be submitted, so that he will only consider the business cases which have been put forward. The Secretary of State will then, once he has decided which option he would prefer to consult on, would come out to consult. And at that point, there may be an opportunity to provide additional evidence if we saw fit from any business cases that were not submitted, but we will then wait to see what the Secretary of State's determination is. I think we are rather anticipating that we might have a final outcome late summer, which I think would be really timely in terms of the impact this has on our staff and also on our residents. But as a reminder to everybody, the new authority will not come into being for a total of 3 years. So we are not changing tomorrow. This is a process that we now need to work through. So at 8:14, can I thank everybody for staying with us on this journey? It's been a remarkable journey, not the one that last Christmas I thought we were going to be going on. Thank you very much. And with that, I'm going to say good night, and we're going to close the live stream.